Hello, welcome to my free Tutorial Friday bonus video. I just did this little demo test this morning. I was here working with Thomas Bertling on our How to Draw book, and we want to have a lot of these kind of videos that we explain all the steps within the book, and then you can pop onto the YouTube channel and watch the content. So I sped it up. I don't have a lot of time today, but I thought I would just put this up on the channel, and should help a little bit. It is sped up quite a bit. It's about 4 times speed. I wish I could draw this fast, but I can't. And I'm not going to go through all the steps. They're somewhat self-explanatory if you know my perspective constructions from my Gnomon drawing DVDs, for instance. It's all the same perspective constructions. Perspective doesn't change. So it's all sections and silhouettes based on the section lines, etc. So it's only going to be running about 8 minutes. I think what I'll do is that as we finish the book, and one of the reasons we're putting this out is we feel bad that we haven't finished the damn books, so but we are working on them, and this is just a little, hopefully buy us a little time, so giving away one of these free little tutorials to help out with your drawing skills. And you can see this is the way I usually start a lot of my sketches, with a very light marker. This I think is probably a Copic marker. Well, I know it's Copic, but it's probably like a number 1 or a 0. I think it's a 1. I think it's a T1. And it allows me to just rough in and explore, the overall proportions, the perspective, and the design before I commit to the pen work, which I'll jump to ballpoint pen right now, actually. So that's it for the marker phase. And so when I start doing the pen work, I usually start, in the front corner and work back. And I also usually start with the wheels. So here I'm using an ellipse guide to go back in and tighten up the wheels, and then all the rest of the drawing will be freehand. And so these are the kinds of things we're going to be explaining a lot in the How to Draw book. And I may or may not, this one may or may not go in. It might. And what I was starting to say is that I'm going to probably go back and revisit this file later and do a much slower one when the book is out, in several months from now, and slow it down, do more real-time speed, and then explain all the steps that I'm drawing here. But in the meantime, hope you still find some value in it and enjoy it. And so what I'm doing now is I go back in. I also mark my ellipse guides so that if I need to go back and grab them at a later point, I know what number it is. This is, you'll see I'm using it here, and what you would think is spun the wrong direction, 90 degrees. It's because my ellipse guide, the 75-degree ellipse guide, is actually die cut wrong. The minor axis is actually rotated. Every one of the cutouts is off by 90 degrees. So if you were paying attention there and you said, hey, how come he's holding that ellipse guide in the wrong direction? That's why. It's because it's manufactured wrong. So I have this kind of very special 75-degree ellipse that's crappy, and have to remind myself. I put a big note on it, rotate 90, when I pick it up. So I go through and clean up the wheels using the ellipse guides, and drop in a little cast shadow and a little suspension, holding that front wheel, that sort of thing. And then you see I use my markers as a guide, and when I'm doing my inking on this ballpoint pen phase, I can pick and choose what I want to keep or what I want to change, and by the time you're done, the light marker just disappears. And if I was to scan this and clean it up in Photoshop, of course, then you can go around and just color dodge to white around, or even just adjust the levels and get rid of the entire marker pass. And then you could, have a nice start for a rendering in Photoshop, that sort of thing. So just putting some louvered vents there. Just adding some sort of miscellaneous, random details at this point, because there's really no narrative or story or design brief for this thing. It's really just a little perspective drawing demo. And you see I'm using quite a wide angle lens here. This is one of my favorite lenses actually to sketch, to indicate when I'm sketching. It's just a wide angle perspective. And the reason for that is you can it looks somewhat dynamic. It's curvilinear, right? It's not straight 1 point or straight 2 point. It's actually things are bending in all directions at once. which makes it a little more fun. It's also what we see with the human eye as curvilinear perspective. And so I'm just using the guidelines of my perspective or my marker sketch and going in and figuring out, the design and putting in the rest of the details. So you'll see this, I'm starting to talk a little bit about this view. I like this view quite a bit. You'll see it on my Facebook page. You'll see a lot of these. I've been doing a lot of these little sci-fi truck things, like semi-trucks, quirky, fun, kind of whimsical. Just, for fun things to draw. I like the proportions. And what you'll see a lot of is this single vanishing point off in the distance, sort of above and behind, or at least above the rear wheels, and, slightly to the back or in that area. And that's one of the views I just like. So it's one of my sort of default perspective views that I always seem to draw. And then you see my vanishing point out to the right. It sort of starts in 1 point, kind of by the rear wheels, and then by the time you get up to the front of the vehicle, it's actually in 2 point. And that's because that guideline going to the right, to my right VP, is actually bending, like if this was shot with a fisheye lens. Technically, if it was shot in this view with the fisheye lens always has the distortion right at the center of your picture. So it's kind of like this is cropped out of a wider angle image, which of course we'll be explaining and talking about all that stuff in the book. There I can see I put that far side wheel in the wrong spot. That's why I was struggling with that shadow, and it's because I didn't spend much time constructing that properly. And when I cross-hatch my shadows, if you've looked at my drawings a lot, you'll see I like to put those cross-hatching lines going to the vanishing point. Now typically when I do a drawing like this, I'll be spinning around my pad a bunch more, which I'm going to do here in a second. And that allows me to do nicer line work. In this case, I just let it sit on the table, so it made for a nicer presentation, which I got to say doesn't help the drawing any. Trying to have it just in a fixed position and sort of move your body around it, it's a little bit tricky. And so typically though, when I draw by myself and not recording, I'll be spinning the pad around much more. So I do that a little bit here in this last minute or so, just to clean up the line work. So this is typically what it would look like if I was drawing in my sketchbook or something. To go in and clean up the line work, just rotate around, and it helps you get a nicer quality by beefing up. And here I'm just intensifying the areas I want the audience to look by increasing the contrast. So I'm first and foremost doing the silhouette of the object, and then going back in and hitting a couple little details and a little bit of quick cross-hatching and adding little details down in the shadows. And that is about it. I think total time of the sketch was probably around 30 minutes. Accelerated now we're just over 8 minutes. So that's it. I hope you have enjoyed it, and have a great week.